The iPad Pro is one of my favorite devices ever, and I talk about it here on the channel all of the time. But what are the apps? Like, you can't have an iPad, you can't have an iPhone without all of the magical apps that you use. So what are the magical apps that I use? Let's find out. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So I'm really excited about this. A lot of you have asked in the comments for this video to see what I use on my iPad on a daily basis. I say I use it on a daily basis. How do I actually use it? So today we're gonna walk through all of the apps that I use. I have them broken down by a few different categories to make sure that there's a structure to this video. And the first set that I really use are I use a lot of the standard Apple apps. The very first one being Calendar. So I use Calendar as kind of like, and I'm trying to get away from this, but I use Calendar as like my do-all everything. So you can see I have all the videos scheduled out. I try to have my videos scheduled out for at least a month. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and some of them will change. Like, this calendar doesn't really count anymore because of an app that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I've also and this drives, so since I hired somebody to like manage the administrative side of like this enterprise, I have them shared on this calendar, which is really awesome, and you can easily share between the teams. But you see like all these ideas that I've kind of like thrown away, they get a notification like every time I make a change to the calendar. So I feel sorry. I apologize for all the craziness, but no, calendars, it's very simple, but it's very easy to use, which is a lot of these Apple apps and why I use them. The next one is Notes. Notes is kind of on its way out, but I've been using it for a few years now, so I want to talk about it here, but just know that it's not really the thing that I'm using anymore. So Notes is another Apple app that's very easy to share between people, and it's just really like, you type some notes, but the whole team can see them. You can also use your pencil to draw on these notes. It's fine, but it's not like the workflow that I would prefer, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. Like, I'm not necessarily, this is a reason that we're moving away from Notes, but if all you're doing is like typing between your team, you're doing like checklists, you're doing maybe like shot lists, Notes can do that perfectly fine. You don't have to buy anything else, you don't have to use anything else. The included app works totally well. This next one seems kind of weird, and it doubly is so because it's not the only collaboration tool that I have on here, but it's actually FaceTime. FaceTime is actually way more powerful and way more usable than I think a lot of people give it credit for. You can have up to 32 people in a single group FaceTime, and if you have more than 32 people in a meeting, nothing is getting done anyway. So I think FaceTime, especially if you're around people, you're a team that uses Apple products, especially like the iPad, this is crazy. I know it's on the phones and I know it's on the MacBooks, but it's really, a lot of these apps are great on either, but when they come together on the iPad, they are where they really shine. And I think FaceTime is probably the best collaboration tool on here. There will be more in like the next section. iMessage is another really important one, and iMessage is kind of a divisive topic when you're talking about Apple versus Windows or Android. I like iMessage just because of how easy it is to then share files across the team. You can share photos, you can share pictures very easily, and you can share larger files than you could through like a standard text message. It's kind of like a mini AirDrop. If you can be like right next to each other within Wi-Fi and Bluetooth range, AirDrop, totally legit. But if you can't and you have to send everything through your Wi-Fi or through your cell service, iMessage is really close, and it's close enough to get a lot of these little things, especially like socials. You're doing Instagram picture edits or you're doing small stuff like that. iMessage can transfer the files. And the last major Apple app that I do use is I do use the email client. I don't have another email app installed. I like the standard email app. It's very easy to organize all of your emails. You can track stuff, you can label things how you want to do it, you can send stuff to junk. It's very easy to block people because trust me, if you're a social media person, you'll get emails all of the time from brands or from just people that are begging you for stuff. You don't necessarily want to see that all the time. So you can very easily set up rules and ways to sort stuff that I appreciate a lot, and it's already installed. So we've moved on from like the boring day-to-day apps. Let's go to the cool apps that I think a lot of people are really here for, and these are the creative apps that I use. Now there are three main creative apps that I use on my iPad. You could use the Photos app for basic like photo editing, but the three apps that I use are LumaFusion for video editing, I use Affinity Photo for photo editing, and I use Procreate for just having fun. But like LumaFusion, let's start off with LumaFusion for video editing. This is the best like editing experience that you are gonna get on a tablet, period. It can do almost everything that a more traditional like NLE, like Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, or Premiere can do, but it keeps it all on tablet size. And you don't even need, like you see that I've got the keyboard to help out like for this demonstration. You don't really need a keyboard. You don't really need the pencil to really interact with this. It's designed to be interacted with just the screen. However, if you do have a keyboard and a mouse, it becomes even better. The cool thing about LumaFusion and the way that it works with like the iPad is, this is probably the best render experience you will ever have. Like, it's better, it's faster than my MacBook Pro, it's faster than my iMac Pro, it's faster than my Windows machine. This is, if you're trying to cut and edit and render 4K video, especially on the go, LumaFusion is a fantastic way to go. There are a few problems. It doesn't have scopes like waveform monitors, vector scopes. Like, it's hard to color grade in here. You can do it, but you have to eyeball it off of the screen, which, as screens are so different, you really want to use the scopes to make your image as similar as possible across all devices. They did just introduce a really cool thing in LumaFusion, which I've been asking for a while, but it's a way to like select multiple clips at the same time. So see this? Like, you can click and drag and select lots of things at one time. You just have to click this little checkbox, which is the enable multi-selection. You can see it brings up little brackets right here. You just click and drag, and then you select everything in that space. Gary, that's how all computers forever have operated. But that's not how LumaFusion has operated in the past. You used to have click, 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 and it was not a very user-friendly or smooth experience, but I really like what they're doing. And Luma Touch, that makes LumaFusion, is a company that has been listening to responses, so hopefully we'll get scopes here soon. Affinity Photo is like an actual pro-level photo editor. There are so many options inside of here that I don't really understand them all, and I've just been messing around with this, just playing around with it, and I have to use Photoshop because there's just so many options inside of this thing. Like, check this out when it loads. You get access to everything you could want to change. You can crop, you can color pick, flood, fill, paintbrush, erase. You can set levels over here. Like, you can edit raw photos. Affinity Photo is crazy powerful, and it's so powerful, I am still in the messing around with it stage. Both of these two apps, though, are paid apps. You don't get them for free. But they are worth their value. The last one that I really like, which is a lot of fun, is Procreate. It's like an illustrative tool that you can use. We used to use them on the thumbnails here to get like cool, like, Gary is great. We use it as a way to like add text to thumbnails, and this thing is just, it is powerful, and you can do all sorts of, like, you can do animations and stuff from here. Like, this is just a fun tool. Like, you get paintbrushes to draw around with. I mean, I'm messing around with it right here, but this is, I am not a good drawer. I'm not a good animator. I'm not a good designer in any way, shape, or form. But this, I love, this app's so much fun. It's so much fun. And I'll just do drawings on it when I ever actually do drawings. And it's really the only time I ever use the pencil. The only reason I ever use this pencil is when I'm using Procreate. So those are the three, like, creative tools that I use. There are some premium productivity apps that I do want to talk about. We've said we're moving away from Notes, we're moving away from some of the Apple products. Just, not that they're bad, but I'm looking for a little more functionality. And the big one that we're moving towards is Notion. Now, if you've seen any videos on Notion, Notion looks like a crazy complicated tool that is impossible. Like, people want, if you watch the videos, people have like these databases that are insanely detailed, and it looks like you need a full-time person to do it. So I haven't been using those. It finally started to click with me in the last week when I started creating some of my own databases and ways to manage stuff. So you can see again, like I was using the Apple Calendar to manage my video ideas, now I actually have a database called Video Ideas. And you can do a couple of things here that I really like. One, you can have a list view where I just go and I type, hey, these are all the video ideas I have. If I have an idea, I just really quickly will go in here, we'll set up the template. You can see we've got new, it brings up the new video template. I can type in the title, I can type in if we have a sponsor for the video, when I want to project it, when I think I'm gonna have it go live. I can assign it to me or my partner, but they always go to me since I'm the video production side of the house. I also add notes in the description on like, what's the story gonna be? What do I think the idea of the video is going to end up being? The last real step on here is I will put in the projected date. And that is when I've locked in that this is an idea that I wanna actually create. So then you go back to the video view here, you go to the calendar view, then you can click and you can see what video we're talking about. So what's on my iPad? What's on my iPad is, it's a tagged by iPad. We don't have a sponsor for this video. We have what I think the title is gonna be. The title is always kind of like a work in progress, and even after I've uploaded a video, sometimes the title will change. We can see that I'm assigned to it, and we talk about my favorite apps. This is really how I'm gonna take my ideas from, this sounds like a good idea, and then through a process, turn it into a video that you're watching. You can set up all sorts of other stuff. We're also using this for our weekly meetings. We have a weekly meeting where we talk about the next week of content. We'll have Instagram ideas. I'm not exactly sure how the Instagram works yet, so more to follow in the Instagram ideas. But what's really nice is you can set up things like the sponsor list. So I've created this list of all the things that like a sponsor that we have on this channel needs from us. We have deliverables, but in these video ideas, if I take it and I put in, so let's see here, what's on my iPad? if I go into the sponsor category, it automatically will load from that shared database that I have in its relation. So I don't have to like create it every time. You can create databases that have links to each other. And that's where, when you start seeing that happen, that's where Notion makes sense. Before that, it doesn't make sense at all. I have a few others on here that I don't really use all that much. I have OneNote that we're considering using to replace Notes, but Notion's kind of taken over that. Something that I don't like is lots of steps when you don't need them. I think OneNote is very powerful. It's much more easy to use than Apple Notes. It's much easier to collaborate with your team with OneNote because you can share it across multiple devices. You don't just have to use Apple. You can also share it to Windows. I don't know. I don't like adding extra steps, and I think anything we would make in OneNote, we would have to then transcode or copy and paste over into Notion because Notion's kind of like the master file. So we're playing around with it. I'm not sure we're actually going to use it yet. The other big set that I do use is the Google Suite. So I use Google Docs for all of my scripts. Like you can even see right now, we're using a Google Doc to talk about all the apps that I want to talk about today. But I have all of my scripts. I write everything in Google Docs so that it's always saved to the cloud. I don't have to then buy another word processing software. So I use it when I use a Windows machine, I use Google Docs. When I use my iPad, I use Google Docs. MacBook Pro's Google Docs. I use Google Docs for everything. Man, saying Google now sounds weird. But I use this for everything. Every written thing like scripts, sponsor reads, everything goes into Google Docs. And that way, also the team can log in here and see what we're working on. And if we need to share files, we use Google Drive, which is much better because again, we're kind of getting split because the video editing machine is kind of turning into a Windows machine. And sometimes I'll need something from the team or I'll need something from my iPad or my iPhone. I can't just airdrop it to Windows, unfortunately. So we use Google Drive, which is pretty much, it's kind of the same thing. It's not as seamless, it's not as quick, but it's okay. So Google Drive and Google Docs, we could not run this YouTube channel without either of those. Now, a couple other things, everybody, and especially when you're dealing with outside agencies or you're dealing with brands, they're not always on Apple and they're not always on iDevices. So sometimes you're gonna need to collaborate on different tools. And the big ones are, if you've worked in the professional sphere in any way, shape, or forms, you know Microsoft Teams and you know WebEx from Cisco. And those are those are collaborations tools. I actually really like Teams. Teams is something that if we didn't use Apple products here and we were only Windows, we'd probably pay for a Teams license here because it does a lot of things. It's a calendar that you can schedule events and meetings around. It's a chat functionality so you can chat amongst your team, and it has file sharing. It has like teams where you can set other people from outside organizations into a Teams. I really, really like Microsoft Teams. We don't use it as much because we don't need it as much. WebEx, I don't really like WebEx that much. It's just a video chat functionality for people that don't have FaceTime. I'm telling you, FaceTime is amazing. WebEx is a necessity from time to time. But it's not all that. Let's talk about socials. Probably the social app that I use most often, if you follow me in any of them, is Twitter. I spend way too much time on the Twitter app, but it is an app that I absolutely use every single day for way too long at a time each day. If you want to get a hold of me, Twitter is the best way to do so. Also, another big app that I'm always on is the YouTube Creators app. It lets you see your channel, it lets you see your comments very easily. Sometimes it crashes and it's not always as functional as I'd like. There are some things that you can get on like the web browser that you can't get here on the Studio app, but it does a good enough job. It tells you like your watch minutes, it tells you how your videos are doing, it tells you the last videos, shows you comment, and that's really what you need to run a YouTube channel. If you really want to dive into your analytics though, you will need to go to like a more traditional computer, but it works. And then we very recently started live streaming over on our Facebook page. So I do have the Facebook page manager up too, so I can respond to comments and interact with everybody because that's gonna be our live presence from the future. You'll notice we do not have Instagram on here because I do not like using Instagram. That's what I have an administrative person for. Part of their job is Instagram because I just don't like it. And we're not all boring here. Sometimes we want a game. So we have one of my favorite games of all time. If I want to play a game for a little bit on my iPad, there's so many games out there. But I just play a little bit of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a little bit of KOTOR. We can't have that open because that's gonna be copyrighted music. But that's the game that I play. So these are all of the apps that are on my iPad. This is how the Everyday Dad operates. From both me getting work done, making these videos, planning out the videos, sometimes processing the videos, to collaborating with the team to make sure that the rest of the invoicing, the emails, all of that stuff happens too. The iPad does all of it. This thing is such a powerful tool, and the apps are really what makes it as good as it is. And you're thinking to yourself, Gary, okay, the iPad is great, but how has it held up? In the last 4 months since you bought it when it was initially announced, how has it held up? Well, thank goodness I got a video for you, viewer. You can click right here to watch it. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.